Hey everybody, I'm James Kotecki, and as you can see, I'm wearing a Bluetooth earpiece right now. That's because I'm about to talk over the phone with Democratic presidential candidates and the former senator from my home state of North Carolina, John Edwards. Senator John Edwards, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, James.
And the first question, which is probably the most obvious one, is where are you right now?
I'm in Chicago. I just spoke a few minutes ago to a national lawyers meeting, and I'm leaving Chicago in a few minutes to go to New Orleans, where I'm beginning a 3-day poverty tour to shine a light on the poverty that still exists in this country.
What is the link for you between domestic poverty, which you've made a big priority in this campaign, and international poverty? Because one could argue that while domestic poverty certainly is a significant problem, international poverty is much more extreme. Some estimates say we have 1 billion people living on less than $1 a day. So what do you make the connection? What do you prioritize, and how would you work with that as president?
Well, my focus has been, my personal focus has been on domestic poverty, but I have done work on the international poverty issue. I've done humanitarian work in Africa. I've spent some time in places like the slums outside of Delhi in India, and I think that world poverty is a huge issue. You mentioned 1 billion people living on $1 or less a day. 3 billion people live on $2 or less a day. And I think these conditions strengthen the forces of terrorism. And if we want to undermine the forces of terrorism, we need to address them and address them head on.
All right, another big global issue that you've made a priority in your campaign is global warming. And I was researching on your website, I saw one interesting plank of your global warming plan was to encourage developing nations, not just developed countries, but developing nations, to curb their emissions and to curb their pollution. The immediate country that comes to mind is China. So how do you actually work with a massive country like China? The economy is growing so rapidly that it is spitting a lot of pollution out into the air. But how do you work with a country like that to actually convince them to sign on to some kind of agreement?
Well, I think to start with, America is not going to be able to get China to do anything until we first clean up our own house. I mean, we're the worst polluter on the planet. We're 4% of the world's population. We emit 25% of the world's greenhouse gases. China's right there with us. I mean, they're building more than one coal-fired power plant a week. None of these plants are scrubbed. And they're obsessed with their own economic development. It drives everything they do. And they're not concerned about global warming, the environment, pollution, what's bad things that are happening in other countries. Just as an example, they very much prop up the Sudanese government that's engaged in genocide in Darfur. So all those things are problems, but America can't engage the Chinese constructively until and if we aggressively address global warming.
The CNN YouTube debates, which are coming up on Monday, July 23rd, I'm very excited about that. I hope that you are as well. And is there anything that you're doing to prepare for these debates that's different than you would prepare for other debates? Because you don't really know what kind of questions are going to be out there. They're coming from just regular people who are submitting questions. So how do you think about these debates going into them?
I think this is a great idea. So first of all, I mean, what happens when members of the media ask all the questions? They ask the same questions over and over and over. I think there's a great possibility and a great likelihood that we're going to get more diverse questions. One thing I want to make clear is what we want to do, what I want to do, is expand the opportunity for people to ask questions. So for 30 minutes after the debate, the televised debate, we're actually going to do an online forum where I answer people's questions. If people will go to johnedwards.com and submit their questions, I will be answering questions in that next 30 minutes. In fact, if they're not even near their computer for some reason, they can text the word debate to 30644 and submit their questions that way. So we've set up a mechanism to expand the amount of time that's available to both get people's questions, and I encourage everyone to submit their questions. I'd love to hear those questions and answer as many of them as I can.
Well, that's great. As a person who's really excited about how YouTube and the internet is changing politics, I definitely applaud you for that initiative. And the last question is, I wouldn't be much of a YouTube journalist if I didn't ask you about this interesting YouTube video that I saw the other day. It was posted, I think, on the 13th of the month. It showed you after I believe it was the NAACP forum, talking with Senator Clinton on the stage afterwards, and you were saying something about limiting the number, and it wasn't clear, was it debates or candidates? Dennis Kucinich, the congressman from Ohio, kind of a third-tier candidate in this race, seemed to think that you were saying that candidates like him shouldn't be in the debates. Is he right about that?
No, he's not, absolutely not right about it. What I was saying, and it's not new, I've said it many times before. What I was saying is, and this is what, by the way, one of the reasons that we're extending the debate with this extra 30 minutes, is I wanted us to get past sound bites. One way of doing it, for example, would be, I didn't suggest this to her, but it's what's in my head, is if we just randomly picked four candidates and broke us up into two groups, and then had two debates instead of one, and more substance, more serious, more time, because there'd only be four people on the stage. I think everybody should be heard. I think there's huge value in having everybody heard and people with different perspectives heard. I also think, though, that we need to try to find ways to have a more in-depth conversation about the issues.
I really appreciate you talking with me today. Senator John Edwards from Chicago, thank you very much.
Thanks, James.